All right, our first one. One, you have been hired by the owner to help put together the program for a new mixed-use housing and retail project in a revitalizing neighborhood downtown. You should, A, put together a detailed budget for the building using assembly method for cost estimating. B, analyze the relative space requirements for each of the different aspects of the project and how they might overlap. C, establish the general form of the building. D, the architect does not develop the program. So this is kind of an interesting question. One of the things you'll find is that many of the answers that you'll get on one of these questions are sort of correct to a degree. The question is, which is the most correct? So there's a kind of a funny one in here, which is D, right? Which looks a little out of place. But I wouldn't be surprised if many of you actually answered D. And the reason that you might have answered D, the architect does not develop the program, is because in the actual AIA documents, in the contracts, in the B101 and its brethren, and the other A201 information, the architect is not expected to develop the program. In fact, the program is typically brought to the architect along with the survey, geotech information, some budget information, some other things like that, some environmental reports maybe. That's the thing that the owners, the clients, will hand to the architect in order for them to figure out what their fee is going to be, how they're going to do the project, how long things are going to take. It's hard to imagine putting together a fee if you don't have the program, if you don't know what the building is supposed to be. So the contracts actually specifically exclude the program from the work of the architect. There is, however, a spot where you can do it as an additional service. It's clearly located, and if the owner checks it off, then you are being paid to develop the program. So you can be in the situation. It's just not the typical where the architect is putting together the program. And the way the question is written, you have been hired by the owner to help put together the program, leads you to think either you're doing it as an additional service on a regular contract, or possibly even more likely, they've just given you a specific contract for doing the program. And the people who would do that are clients who just don't have the skill set, don't have a big infrastructure of development personnel who know how to put together a program, and so they might actually ask the architect to deal with it. So that's one of those funny ones, but it is not D. Let's keep going right up that list. How about C, establish the general form of the building? This one is actually a key one that I want to make sure you hear. It is absolutely not C. The reason for that is, and this is so hard for architects, myself included, to hear, but when you're putting together the program, the whole point is that you're doing research and analysis, and you're assembling data and information and goals and things like that. You are not designing. You are absolutely not designing. I can almost guarantee there will be some form of a question that leads you to think you should be designing in the program, and you're not designing when you're putting the program together. And the reason for that is if you're designing too early, if you start in where putting together data information, and at the same time you're off on the side sketching what you think the building should look like, suddenly your data will start fitting to your designs. Subconsciously, maybe consciously, but the reason that you don't do it that way, the reason you don't want to start designing, is because the data becomes suspect. You want the data to come through, and then once you've done that, the designs to come from that data. I'm using data a little loosely. Some of it's actual data, some of it's goals and other conversations with owners and things like that. So that's a big one. I just want to make sure everybody hears that you're not designing during programming. So then we have the first two that are the possibilities. A says, put together a detailed budget for building using assembly method for cost estimating. Putting together a budget for the building does make sense. It's not likely to be detailed, so that word bothers me. And I'm certainly not going to be using the assembly method of that. That's a thing where I'm getting into much more detail about like is it brick with an air cavity, or is it metal siding? Like I'm getting into the design well before I would be ready to do it. So it's not A either. So therefore, we are B, analyze the relative space requirements for each of the different aspects of the project and how they might overlap. One of the big things you do, it's only one of many, but one of the big things you do when you're putting together a program is everybody, all the different departments, if it's a corporation, or all the different rooms, if it's a house or whatever it happens to be, you're sort of looking to say, like, everybody wants conference rooms and everybody wants, team spaces, and everybody wants a place for the copiers and all of that. Well, maybe you can make one conference room that works with 3 different departments or something, instead of having 3 separate conference rooms. One of the points of the program is to kind of find those pieces of information about those potential overlaps for the program. So B is the answer.